And away we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. This is Coffee Talk or Coffee Talk Live or at Coffee Talk Live if you're looking for me on YouTube or Prepper University on YouTube or at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter. So this is broadcasting on Twitter now, apparently, as well as fistfulofradio.com, fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. I see we having a little bit of a tussle there in the background. You see the chair. That's Daniel's spot, and I guess he doesn't want to share. Uh, we'll see how that goes because they were getting along a moment ago. And of course, if you are listening and not able to see, you didn't see the cat fight back there. And keep in mind, I will, as always, attempt to read as many of the comments as I can so that we can keep up with the gist of the conversation while we look through some of what's in the news today, some things that are highlights in the news and some things you may not have seen at all. And I'll go ahead and acknowledge some of the people who were able to join us live on the YouTube portion. There's Helter is here, Dragon. Urban is here. He says they're nice and early today. Keisha is here. Preparedness veteran. Nostalgic Pod Blast is here. Boogers says it's a good rainy afternoon where they are. Urban, it says rumble in the kitty chair. Exactly. Daniel doesn't want to share. That's his spot, apparently. But don't scratch that up. Get down. Anyways, as we prepare to move on in the news, actually, those kittens, I wonder how they'll react when the kittens are gone, because they are going to get worked on by the vet come October 12th, and then we'll see about getting them adopted. The kittens, anyways. And the mama cat, the one we call Granny Smith, will finally get her leg properly examined to see what's wrong with her, why she can't walk properly. But anyway, as we get ready to jump in, we can start off with a candidate for presidency. All People is here. Thanks for joining us today as we get ready to jump off and talk about Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy, he says all the right things, but does he mean it? Does he mean it? Only time will tell if he is elected. Time will tell. He says everything, mostly, he says everything right. He says everything most of the people in this country, whether you want to call them, I know they like to call them conservatives or right wing or whatever, or Republicans, blah, blah, but we're in a fix whereby a lot of people who are otherwise democratic or liberal minded or libertarian or whatever can agree with a lot of what he has to say. So does he mean it? Again, only time will tell, because you shouldn't just trust someone because they ask you to. Let's put it that way. This particular article comes from News Nation. Oh, and there's Daisy. Thanks for joining us today, Daisy. It says Ramaswamy, the real enemy we face today is the CCP. That's an interesting statement. And of course, the CCP would be the Chinese Communist Party, would be the Chinese Communist Party. So let's see what Ramaswamy has to say about that as we read into the article. 2024 Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy joined On Balance with Leland Vittert while stumping in Michigan to address the community's resistance to the development of a Chinese-owned battery plant. What China has done is that they have used commerce, what we once called capitalism, as a vehicle to advance their own political agenda, Ramaswamy said. For months, hundreds of community members in northern Michigan's Green Charter Township rallied to push back against the construction of an electric vehicle battery plant by the Chinese-owned company Goiten due to fears of national security risks. How much U.S. farmland does China own? Question mark. The flashpoint highlights the growing awareness of widespread Chinese investments in crucial American industries across the country. Ramaswamy took a strong stance on addressing concerns about China's influence in the United States. Where are we here? I think that we have to recognize that the real enemy we face today is the CCP, or Chinese Communist Party. That is the real Cold War of our century, he said. He emphasized the CCP poses a significant threat to the United States and urged for a re-evaluation of the nation's dependence on China. One of the things we have to do is recognize that we can't depend on our enemy for our modern way of life, he said. From the shoes on our feet to the phones in our pockets to the pharmaceutical supply chain to even our own U.S. military industrial supply chain, which I can't agree with. Unfortunately, though, I can't say that that's the greatest threat we face. Our own government is the greatest threat that we face, quite frankly. And any citizen in any country should have that approach. How much are they encroaching on us? How much is our government encroaching on us? How much are they trying to regulate us? How much are they trying to tax us? How much control are they trying to maintain over us? And how far are they willing to go to push that? But he is right about the Chinese Communist Party being a threat to the United States as far as manufacturing and industrialization is concerned. And that's our own fault, because no country, I don't care how prosperous or wealthy that country is, should be so heavily reliant on import from any other country for goods, raw materials, or services like the US is with China. It shouldn't happen. There's a lot of things you could blame for it. Again, I've gone back to the steel and iron workers strikes of the 50s and 60s that showed US manufacturers that it was cheaper to import steel from China than it was to deal with unions in our own country. So, but there's a lot more at fault than just unions. So I can agree with that. I can agree. I don't think it's the biggest threat necessarily, because I think encroachment and overreach from our own government is probably one of our biggest threats right now. But this is a major threat. It's up there. It's in the top 5. Let's put it like that. And that is something that should be addressed, and something that we should be looking at and considering, and something that we should be trying to move away from. But it's going to be very, very difficult to move away from that when all these manufacturers and these companies know they can get, again, raw materials and goods and services from China cheaper than it is to manufacture it here. Think about that. Why should I deal with the union? Kaiser Permanente, we talked about them yesterday. This is their second day, 75,000 workers on strike from Kaiser Permanente, trying to force a higher wage. And if they get it, what's going to happen? You know, they're going to have to get rid of more people in order to maintain that, because they're not going to give up whatever they're doing as far as earnings, but they will attack the bottom line, which is employees. Less employees, keep the profit margin the same. So that means more televisits, telehealth visits, and things like that. More automated, more AI answering the phone. It's a huge problem. So we've already pushed most of those jobs overseas anyways. How do you get them back, Ramaswamy? How do we fix that? Acknowledging a few more people in here. Dilo says that they made it. Rock Valley is here. Helter says Ramaswamy still has a lot to learn about foreign policy. Sanctioning China only brings us much closer to war with China. H12 says the waste from that plant will poison the farmland and the people who work there. That's a good point. Dragon says, if elected to the presidency, Vivek Ramaswamy would allow China to invade Taiwan. You think so? And Keisha made a $10 donation to the channel. Thank you, Keisha. Very much appreciated, as always. Goes a long way towards taking care of our critters, all of the strays that we take care of. I've got several in here. They're all watching me. There's a couple over here sitting on the boxes, surrounded all the time. And hey, even just food and litter gets up there. Oh, here we go. Say hello, everybody. Meow. How you doing, buddy? You want some attention, or you just want to say hi? He just wants to say hi. Urban says, I was applying for a purchasing and logistics position in Richmond, British Columbia, where most of the jobs openly stated Mandarin speakers only. That city is 75% Chinese, both citizens and non. Wow. Flukeman said the world made a mistake doing business with China. USA actually believed if they showed them the capitalist democracy way of life, eventually they'll become more like the West. It continued, and I guess we'll catch up here. It said should have done business with Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, Mongolia. Well, we already were doing business with Japan, and we should have just kept it that way. China could do it cheaper, is basically what it boiled down to. But China can do it cheaper because they are communist. No matter how capitalist it looks on the outside, they are a communist country, and they can make whatever decisions they want. That's how they do things that are insane, like euthanization vans for executing criminals and harvesting organs from people that they execute and all kinds of crazy things that go on in China. That's why they're able to do that, because there's nothing to stop that. And nobody from any other country is going to, I mean, you can cry about it all you want, but you're not going to make China do anything. They're too big. As we move down here, well, let's see. Armored says British Columbia is practically a Chinese colony. Oh no, is it really? Well, that's what happens. That's what happens. But I mean, they're not above making money. And as much as people want socialism and communism, as you can see, there's still people on the top and people on the bottom. People think that if they go, and they've been convinced in the United States anyways, in a lot of the Western world, oh, if we have socialism, then everybody will be on an even keel. When has that ever been demonstrated? Are there not Chinese billionaires? They are a communist country. Were there not people that wealthy in the USSR? I mean, there's still us and them, even in a communist or a socialist society. All that's even is that everybody down on the bottom is making the same pay. And that's no fun. Who the hell wants that? And all people says Ramaswamy took foundation money from the Soros family, worked with the W3F speakers only in talking points. And Bam says China's like a giant flock of locusts. Yeah, a lot of them are brainwashed or afraid to say anything. Afraid to say anything. Oh, we're going to jump back to Philadelphia here. And we've talked about that a lot because of because of course, who was it? Meatball. We talked about that a lot because of the riot and then all the trouble the Meatball got in and how she's been trying to weasel out of it. But this is not about Meatball. This particular story is about the district attorney of Philadelphia. Stacy said, "What happened with the alarm when it hit your time?" My alarm never rang. Because people were mentioning that yesterday, saying their alarms went off. Mine never rang, and I still do not have a prompt on my phone. Mine never worked. So there. I don't know what I did differently, but I did not get an alert at all. This particular article is on Fox News, but you can pick your poison. You know, I just grab an article, and you can pick any article you want and probably find pretty much the same thing. It says progressive DA will investigate if Philly rioters are fundamentally law-abiding people before prosecution. Oh, isn't that sweet? Progressive Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, who has been accused of being soft on crime, assured reporters in recent days that he will investigate the people involved in widespread looting of the city in an even-handed way. In other words, he's going to let him slide. Krasner, who was impeached, and this is an important point, and I brought this up when we first started talking about this story. Krasner, who was impeached by Pennsylvania Republicans last year for policies they alleged exacerbated crime in the city, claimed that he will weigh whether those arrested in connection to the looting have been fundamentally law-abiding people throughout their lives, despite their antics over the weekend. Now, Krasner was impeached a year ago for dereliction of duty, and he's still doing the job. Again, tell me how impeachment works. Tell me how it matters. Krasner made his comments at a pre-planned crime summit at St. Joseph's University on Saturday following last week's crime spree, where crowds broke into multiple Philadelphia stores, stealing products and destroying property. Why don't you call it what it is? If it was white people or Asian people, you would have said so. The only people that I saw in any of those videos who were not black was a couple of police officers. Even most of the police were black. He doesn't want to say it though. They won't say that in the media. Among the stores hit were Apple Store, Rite Aid, Dunkin'. Philly police have released more security camera footage this week for others to help them identify more suspects who can be brought to justice for the incident. Are they going to be brought to justice? At the summit, Krasner told Fox 29 there will be judicial restraint while prosecuting criminals. Oh, okay. He said, we're going to prosecute people in an even handed way. We're not going to let any judge who thinks there is a caste system and some people get better treatment than others. We're not going to let any judge disturb the peace of this city. Oh, the judges are disturbing the peace of the city. I understand now. I wasn't clear on that. I thought the rioters did that. The Fox affiliate described Krasner's approach to prosecuting these looters as being focused on individual justice, noting the DA claimed the suspects will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Well, of course they would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis because that's kind of how court works. Krasner continued, we'll look carefully to see whether this is a one-off situation and they're fundamentally law-abiding people. Hold them accountable one way or whether they are criminals and they're about taking advantage of some sort of unrest for their own benefit and they will be prosecuted another way. I think that if you came out of a protest, even though they try to divide the protest from the riot, if you came away from that and said, hey, let's loot this neighborhood and tore gates down and smashed through stores and stole things and damaged property, that you were taking advantage. I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. I'm pretty sure you were taking advantage of the situation, Krasner. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Catching up some more comments here. Armit says the Chinese don't typically question authority that much. They focus on material gain. That's their Russian dietry. Well, they don't focus on authority too much. They don't question authority too much because they're afraid to. You know, they have citizen forces that are like the brown shirts, basically. They're not police. They don't officially work for the government, but they got the armband on. That's a thing. And they're official rats that work for the state and will turn you in for anything, you know, kind of like in 1984. And you had the guy who was sitting there saying that he was being subversive and didn't realize he was, but his kid turned him in, thank God. If you remember that part of the storyline. As I catch up a few more of these comments here. Urban says if it were white people or other non-black people who would have been called a violent riot and treated as an insurrection, that's possible, at least by the media. Armit says the regime has also been looting the people via the treasury, and that hold accountable. Why does this term come up so much instead of imprison or execute? Yeah, hold them accountable. And here's Anarchy from Minnesota. Thanks for joining us today. Flukeman said, what happened to the system when the government kicked delinquents to the military? The army used to deal with these thugs. Yeah, that's true. That used to be a thing, and I don't know if they do that anymore. That for those of you who might not be old enough to remember, once upon a time, if you were a juvenile delinquent and troublemaker, a judge could give you an ultimatum: go to jail or join the army. And the discipline of the army would sort you out in most cases. I don't know if they even do that anymore. All People says most U.S. cities, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, have been lost to post-65 Caribbean and African migrants. And Urban says, if you wish to see what happens when the race grifters come to real power, just look at what's going on in South Africa beyond horror. Yeah, South Africa was already bad, but it fell completely apart when Nelson Mandela took over. It got really bad. And that's not what people expected, but that's what happened. But anyways, I mean, yeah, these people looted and rioted and took advantage of a situation. And that's him. That's Larry Krasner. Impeached Larry Krasner, been impeached for a year. It solved absolutely nothing because impeachment means zero. It's embarrassing, but it doesn't do anything as far as I know. Does anybody know what impeachment is supposed to do? Because apparently you can keep on working like nothing happened. Keep on trucking, Larry. Keep on trucking, Larry. Do a case by case. Look into these. Get some social workers. Get a social worker for everybody. I think they've caught 72 of the looters so far. Do a case by case on them and have them sit with social workers, and they'll sit there and cry about how they grew up in poverty and whatever, and then give them a pass. Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that, Larry? Because that sounds like that's about what's going to happen. And I don't know why, if the government is fed up with that in Philadelphia, they don't replace him, because he can be terminated, but they don't get rid of him, do they? They just impeach the guy, and nobody seems to care. As we shuffle right along here to, who is this? This is Yonhap News. Yonhap News, and this is translated to English because this is actually Korean. Okay, because they're having a migrant crisis as well. Why not? South Korea to crack down on illegal immigrants. Everybody's getting tired of it, the world over, because there's been floodgates of immigrants, illegal immigrants, in really most of the Western world, but it's happening in other places, as we talked about earlier in the week. Pakistan, who is evicting some, 4 or 5 million people, including, they said, 1,730,000 Afghan illegals. They want them out of the country, and they told them, if you're not out of here by November 1st, we're going to come find you. Korea's doing it now too, or South Korea, I should say, because I don't think there's too many illegal immigrants going into North Korea. You get shot going into North Korea, so it's a pretty good deterrent. So Seoul, the government is set to begin a 2-month crackdown next week on foreigners staying or working illegally in the country, the Ministry of Justice said Thursday. The crackdown, the third of its kind, that will last through December 9th, will mainly focus on foreigners who work in entertainment services or those with criminal records, as well as companies that habitually employ undocumented foreigners and their brokers. What do you mean by entertainment services? You're talking about prostitution? The basic policy of our government is to flexibly expand legal stays and strictly regulate illegal stays, Justice Minister Han Dong-hoon said. The ministry said illegal immigrants caught in the crackdown will be ordered to pay fines before being deported and banned from re-entry. So they're gonna rob them and throw them out. But those who volunteer to leave South Korea will be exempt from the fines and will be allowed to return to the country. Maybe. In 2022, the number of illegal immigrants came to 411,270 compared with 355,126 in 2018, according to data posted on the ministry's website. How do they have such an accurate number of how many illegal immigrants are in their country? We have exactly 411,270 illegal immigrants currently. How do you know that? How do they have it narrowed down that much? I want to know how they did that. Anyways, I'll catch up a few more comments while you absorb that. All people said South Africa was empty space surrounded by hunter-gatherer nomads when Europeans arrived. A warlord named Shaka Zulu made refugees of the nomads. They quickly outbred the Europeans. Actually, there is a mini-series called Shaka Zulu that was on network television in the 1980s. 5-part miniseries, which is a really good reenactment of that time period, and actually, for the most part, accurately describes what Shaka Zulu did during that time. He absorbed or displaced or completely eradicated tribes systematically. That went on in that part of Africa anyways, but Shaka Zulu fine-tuned it. He figured out a system that would expedite the whole process. And it's an interesting, even though it's dramatized, it's an interesting miniseries to watch. And Bams says South Africa is beyond stupid. Dragon says the problem will only worsen due to the increasing threat of drugs in Korea. People might think this is just an exaggeration, but drugs are becoming a major issue and often tied to illegal immigrants. Okay. And Flukeman says even North Korea doesn't want refugees. They kicked out the soldier Marine, crossed the border. Yeah, North Korea, the guy who tried to defect, they threw him back. They threw him to the wolves. That's just one. Like, no, dude, get out of here. I remember that. Helter says the reason why there's so many people illegally in Korea is because there are jobs willing to hire them, usually for very low pay and very long working hours. Isn't that how it is there, anyways? Helter says cracking down on the employers rather than simply targeting the illegal employees would definitely help reduce the temptation to live and work illegally in Korea. And there's H12 saying, hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. Urban says, if I was a business savvy drug lord in Mexico and beyond, I would be taking advantage of every undocumented person by turning them into one of my mules. People without documents are actual slaves. Well, there's a lot of muling going on coming across the southern border anyways, and they're catching a lot of drugs coming into the country that way, mostly cocaine. So that goes on. And while that's going on, while they're throwing them out of South Korea, they're also throwing them out of Chicago. As we pop over to Chicago really quickly, and this is from The Messenger. The news source here is The Messenger. Chicago migrants locked out of police station turned shelter. Crowd onto sidewalk with their belongings. Crowd onto the sidewalk with their belongings. Because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, the police stations in Chicago have been being used as shelters. The hallways are full of hundreds and hundreds of so-called migrants clogging the shelters. And the police are tired of it, and they're putting them out now. Furniture and personal items, including mattresses, were strewn about the sidewalk after the doors to the Chicago Police District 1 station were reportedly locked. Now, I want you to think about this. These people have been there so long and have gotten so comfortable with just living in the police station. There's furniture. They've got sofas, mattresses, tables, dressers. They furnished the police station. That's how long they've been in there. They had no intention of going anywhere. Bill Clinton, who said, oh, they're not looking for a handout. They just don't want to just hang out somewhere. Sure they do. They don't care. Look at this. Look at this. Full-on eviction. Throw everybody out and lock the police station. God forbid anybody needs to go in there for an emergency. Migrants who were staying inside a police station in downtown Chicago found themselves locked out of the facility on Wednesday, leaving them on the sidewalk with all their belongings from mattresses to dolls. Fox 32 Chicago reported the crowd formed outside Chicago Police District 1 near 17th and State Streets. They packed the sidewalk, or the packed sidewalk could be seen filled with various items, including furniture and mattresses. Portable toilet was also placed outside the station. The migrants are among more than 3,000 who are awaiting placement in shelters as the city has grappled with housing 17,000 asylum seekers. Yeah, asylum seekers, but are they here legally? Who have been sent from Texas and several other Republican-led states to Democratic-run cities like Chicago and New York since last year. Call it what it is. Those Republican-led states sent them there for a reason, because they are overloaded. They are overloaded. Some of those seeking placement in the shelter system have been housed in lobbies of police stations and airports. Yeah, we know that. As of Wednesday, 764 migrants were living at O'Hare International Airport. It's a bus shuttle center, according to Fox 32. City officials said many of those migrants have been arriving on planes from San Antonio, Houston, and New York, among other cities. But the news outlet reported Wednesday those who were living in the downtown police station were cleared out of the facility. The doors to the complex were locked, according to the news station. Oh, well, frankly, they never should have been in there in the first place. Freedom for All says, what do you think about the show Jericho? Is that the one where there was specific nuclear strikes across the country, and it turned out to be a red flag from the government that they had arranged for dirty bombs to be set off in major cities across the U.S. so that they could reformat? Is that the one? As soon if that's the one I'm thinking of, as soon as on that show it was revealed that the government was actually responsible, the show went off the air. Just throwing you a bone there. Armit says, "Will we have AI-powered toilet soon?" Don't you already? Don't they automatically flush when you stand up or when you back away from it if it's a urinal? Um, all people said Shaka Zulu was evil personified. He ever existed, Europeans would not have been outbred by refugees, and South Africa would be a first world nation led by the descendants of European founders. Interesting. Dragon says a police station is not a shelter. Yeah, exactly. Send them all to the White House to live with Biden since he wants them here, or just deport them back and tell them to file the correct paperwork. They ought to all be sent back where they came from. You know where my stance is on that. H12 says if Ukraine is running out of soldiers, then all those army-aged illegals should be flown there. There you go. Yeah, drop them off in the Ukraine. That's a good idea. Fluke Man says must have been very convenient waiting for deliveries at a police station since it's open 24/7 or close to that. Helder said, sure wish I could get free housing, free food and water, free everything. U.S. citizens don't get free handouts and free lunches. And Freedom for All says, yes, and an EMP. Yeah. I was wondering, and again, that's an interesting point about Jericho, because once you boil it down and you find out, oh, wait, the government had something to do with setting this up so that they could restructure the country, the show was taken off the air. It just got thrown out. Armit says USA is king of clown world. It feels that way, doesn't it? It sure feels that way, but they never should have been in the police station in the first place. And like I said, these people have been there so long and were so comfortable. They were bringing furniture into the building. That is completely unacceptable. They were moving in. Hell yeah, we'll just live at the police station. Have all my mail sent there. And speaking of migrants, this actually, this is actually a great example and has been circulating a lot through the media because people are actually very upset about this. People are very upset about this. I'll read one more comment and then we'll get into the news story. Preparedness says South Africa is a good example of mismanaged country. South Africa is what the West will be like in another 10 years if we're lucky. Ugh, I can imagine. I can imagine. But here we go. I don't know if you've seen this. You probably have because it's made major national news. And this comes from CBS News. Army-Navy game hotel reservations canceled due to the influx of migrants in Massachusetts. Because you know the Army-Navy game is a big deal. And it's coming up here. And all the hotels are full. They're full of immigrants. And your tax dollars are paying for it, of course. So all the reservations that people had that were coming into Massachusetts for the Army-Navy game have been canceled because the hotels are making more money from the state to house these immigrants than they would have made from the natural clients who made reservations so that they could come for the game and stay over. So they turned them out. Reading into the article, Foxborough, it is one of the most anticipated games in college football, and this year it is being played at Gillette Stadium. The Army-Navy game will make its Foxborough debut on December 9th. American presidents often attend, but you can be certain tens of thousands of veterans will pour into the greater Boston area. Tickets to the game sell out quickly, and hotel rooms become a hot commodity. That's why it was all the more troubling when Mark Mansbeck, a travel agent out of New Jersey, started getting calls from clients that their hotel rooms for the game were being canceled. He decided to call the hotels his agency was partnering with for the game. They were leasing out the hotels to the state of Massachusetts for refugees, Mansbach said he was told. It was the response from 3 hotels owned by Geary Hotel Management, according to Manbeck. The companies, he explained, was working with the state to house migrants under the right to shelter law. His clients' previously booked hotel rooms were canceled to continue the lease with the state. Mansbeck said at least 70 of his reservations were impacted. I mean, you get the idea. And that's just one guy they're talking to that, he's losing clientele. It's affecting an operation all the way in New Jersey because he made arrangements for people with those hotels to come to Massachusetts from other parts of the country. And now they're calling him. He didn't even know. They're calling him complaining, hey, the hotel canceled my reservation, dude. What's the problem? And he can't even find spots for them now. He can't even find spots for them now. A couple more comments here. Urban says Israel found itself in a similar situation. The refugees of the West Bank were literally herded by all the surrounding countries. Israel was the only country that allowed shelter in their territory. Yeah, they're having a lot of trouble with that now. All People says, imagine the gall of entering legally or by deception, illegally by force, someone's home, expecting them to take care of you, knowing and caring nothing about them except that they have more than you. Nature Nerd says, out schools have to absorb, I guess he means our schools have to absorb hundreds of illegal immigrants, and then our property taxes go up and local school districts go bankrupt. They shouldn't be allowed in the public school system. I agree. I agree, because that's another, any facet of normal society that they touch, your tax dollars are paying for, and it's a strain on the entire community. Preparedness says, same in Britain, people had their weddings canceled at short notice without compensation. That sucks. Nature Nerd said immigrants never got handouts in U.S. history. That's true. They've always worked hard in the past to make it in the U.S. They don't need handouts. Yeah, and again, if you came here properly and you worked and you made the effort and you earned it, I got nothing to say. Nothing to say. You found your way. You earned your citizenship. You did everything you were supposed to do because you really wanted it. You wanted to earn it. I respect that. Sneaking in and living off the fat of the land, I get a problem with that. Where are we here? Helter. It says, I bet the hotels are making way more money off the state than the fans who booked many months ago and were hoping not to get blown up like this. Yeah. And that's the thing, is the states did not offer bids. They just threw a price out there and the hotels jumped at it because it was more than they normally earn. Dragon says, if the government hadn't spent decades meddling in the housing market by blocking the construction of permanent housing, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. Haha. And H12 said, Ukraine, the new destination for unwanted and illegal immigrants. Wouldn't that be something if we took all of those cargo planes and just funneled them into cargo planes and took off and they didn't know where they were going, and you unloaded them in the Ukraine and they're like, where the hell are we? Wouldn't that be a handful? We'd never get away with it. Urban says all the lefty losers will now have to move to a red state so they can begin destroying it as well. That's communism. Everyone must operate at the lowest common denominator to keep things equitable. And then one more here from Nature Nerd, and we'll move on. Mexico, South America, and China don't allow foreigners to own land, but we allow illegals to own land in the U.S. That is correct. And that's DeSantis was fighting against that. He was making it a law that China and Chinese interests cannot purchase and own land in Florida. And here's Monkey. Monkey says, hello, late due to meeting at job place. Job meetings are worthless. They are a waste of time. They are gripe sessions and they are boring and they don't accomplish anything. There, I said it. I've never been to any meeting at any job site that was beneficial by any degree that I can think of. Just had to say it. Just had to say it. Who wants to talk about AOC? Who wants to talk about AOC really quickly here? You know who that is. Because this news source, and that is Snopes, Snopes is trying to make her look like a regular Joe. They're trying to fact check on behalf of AOC because you're all mistaken about her. But I'm going to undo their fact check. You know, I love to mess with when they do fact checking because most of the time they're being deceptive. Fact check. AOC achieved multimillionaire status after serving 4 years in Congress? Question mark. Okay. Claim. Evidence exists that shows U.S. Republican, or excuse me, U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, is a multimillionaire after spending just over 4 years in Congress. Rating: false. Snopes says it's not true. Snopes says that's a lie. And they're going to explain why. And then I'm going to show you how it is that Snopes is lying. Okay. Snopes says in September 2023, a user on X, that's Twitter, of course, posted that the U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, perhaps best known simply as AOC, had achieved the status of a multimillionaire after serving in Congress for just over 4 years. I'm more interested in how she became a multimillionaire in 4 years, the user posted. And they don't tell you who that user is, I guess. This post received thousands of likes and appeared as a response under a discussion in which ex-owner Elon Musk had earlier said of Ocasio-Cortez, she's just not that smart. That's Elon Musk talking. She's not that smart. How'd she get the money? Many other users repeated the same rumor about her finances in subsequent tweets, blah, blah, blah. They talk about what users had to say. I don't care about that. I want to get to their fact checking. Let me get down here. As Reuters previously reported in August 2022, Ocasio-Cortez's financial disclosures showed that she was far from being a millionaire, much less a multimillionaire. Her campaign website, OcasioCortez.com, also mentioned the same article. We reviewed AOC's financial disclosures from 2019, 2020, 21, 22, and 23, which are available on the U.S. House website. According to the most recent disclosures, AOC had documented that she had no more than between $1,000 to $15,000 in each of 3 different bank accounts. The total for these 3 accounts would land somewhere between $3,000 and $45,000. She also recorded in the disclosure having between $1,000 and $15,000 in additional funds in a 4th account for a 401k plan. Further, she noted in the disclosure that she was still paying off student loans with an amount of liability landing somewhere between $15,000 to $50,000. In other words, Ocasio-Cortez was worth $940,000 short of being a millionaire, with the maximum possible amount of the 4 accounts totaling $60,000. So, according to Snopes, AOC is only worth $60,000, and what they use to fact check that she's a millionaire, a multimillionaire, is the fact that she, on her personal website, discloses that she only has 4 bank accounts with no more than $45,000 in them. Okay, so what we're going to do is what any nitwit can do with Google. All right, let me catch up a couple more comments here really quick. Monkey says, as long as I get paid, by all means, I won't mind the meetings. But if I'm not getting paid, then I'll just have a hard time understanding what's going on in the meeting. I feel you. Urban says, the only meetings that accomplish anything happen at the golf course. And Nature Nerd says, all these Democrats preach about hating the rich, but become millionaires through insider trading and special interest favors and corrupt fundraising, which is despicable. Preparedness says, I must be lucky. I never come across this personality, influencer, celebrity thing. Nature Nerd says, AOC could pay off her student loans quite easily. What a joke. Keisha says, aren't most politicians wealthy? Yeah, most of them are. When you're talking about that level of politician, representatives, senators, mayors of large cities, mayors, governors, so on and so forth, it's big money. Dragon says, AOC never worked a real job in her life. Urban says, I recall that for years Bernie Sanders complained about the millionaire class. When he finally became a millionaire, he abruptly started complaining about the billionaire class. Good point. All right, back to the article real quick. Snopes, covering for AOC, here she is, without her makeup, and I think she looks better that way, quite frankly, says that it's false that she's a multimillionaire because on her personal website, she claims that she only has 4 bank accounts with roughly $45,000 combined. All right, so Let's look up real quick on the internet, because you can do this with any famous person now. You can look up any celebrity, any politician, anybody, basketball player, whoever you want, and you can fact check their net worth. So let's do that. Let's do that. 9 million. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known as AOC, American politician and activist, has a net worth estimated at $9 million. She is one of the most vocal Democrats in the country. AOC earns $1 million in annual income through various businesses and investments. And another source claims her net worth is $29 million. Okay. So Bing says 9 million, and that she earns roughly $1 million a year from businesses that she owns and investments. And it's speculated that her net worth is actually 29 million. Wrap your mind around that, Snopes. How does that work? Did I miss something? Did I miss something? What do you think of that, people who are watching now, who are able to answer? H12 says, of course they're wealthy. They're allowed to have insider trading. And All People says Reuters is actually pronounced Reuters because it's a German newspaper. Okay. I don't know. I never heard it. I just read it. So Reuters. I'll try to remember that. I might say it wrong again anyway. Nature Nerd says Dianne Feinstein gave her family $175 million after she died. That means she was corrupt for decades. She was corrupt her entire political career, I'm sure, if that's the case. But where does this money come from? What does a senator make? Again, what is a senator's salary? $174,000. Senators make roughly $174,000 a year. It's right there. $174,000. Which isn't bad. I'd like to make $174,000 a year. I'd be happy with that. You could live comfortably with that if you spend your money properly, if you're not extravagant, concentrate on your bills, put your pennies away. You know what I mean? So if she is making for the last 4 years $174,000, you figure net about 110-ish, and she saved even half of that, she'd be worth about $200,000. So where do we get 9 million from? With it actually being suspected as being as much as $29 million. How'd that happen, AOC? I want to know how that works. Someone explain that to me, because I really need the money. Anarchy says, Das ist Reiching, pronounced Reuters. Okay. We're still on Reuters. Preparedness says, I just asked Bard, the AI bot, how much her worth is. Bard says, according to Celebrity Net Worth, AOC has a net worth of $200,000, which is still more than Snopes says she's worth. Snopes says she's only worth $45,000 to $60,000. And Bard says $200,000. Stacy says, would you ever want to live in the UK? I don't think so, because their laws are a lot more stricter than the US. Not that it's not, I don't have a problem with the country and necessarily the indigenous people, but the government is always a problem. H12 says it would be interesting if all holders of public office had to put all their money in the government while they hold office. And Bam says that 175 million, not including crypto, precious metals, and gemstones and art. Wow. Rock Valley says, thought she was a bartender. Yeah, she was. Maybe she earned all that money from tips. That's it. A little tip for AOC. Something in the jar. Maybe that's where all the money came from. Maybe that's how she did it. But yes, my understanding is that she used to be a bartender, that she was a bartender before becoming a senator. How does that work? How do you get to be a senator for being a bartender? I'm telling you, I'm in the wrong line of work because nobody's paying me. I'm not making any money. I'm barely I'm barely getting anything from ad revenue from YouTube. They try to they try to take that away with every video I put up. I get a yellow strike on pretty much every video, and you can appeal it, but by the time the appeal process is over, if they authorize it, your window of opportunity is already passed because everybody who's going to see it's already seen it. So, I mean, I must be doing something wrong. I must be doing something wrong. Urban says, not sure about the UK, all of the UK, but London itself is a cesspool. I went there once and hopefully never again. I understand. All People says politicians also charge huge speaking engagement fees. That's true, which they do not count as official salary and can use for personal campaigning costs. Yeah, that's true. The speaking engagement fees are insane. Remember, Barack Obama makes over $400,000 per speaking engagement. So if you're in college or university and he shows up and talks to you for 15 or 20 minutes, the college or university paid him over $400,000 of money that could have gone to something more useful. Sink that in. Preparedness is once again, transparency is a bit cloudy, another trust failing. Indeed, indeed. Very much so. But again, I must be in the wrong line of work. I'll tell you what. How do you get to be from a bartender to a senator? How do you get to be an alderman and then a senator for like a week and then president? Ask Barack Obama. This one's coming from Fox News. One more article here. It says Women's Tech Conference. I heard about this. Did you hear this one? Women's Tech Conference overrun by men claiming to be non-binary, which draws amused reactions. Nature Nerd says Queen Elizabeth wasn't good if in her lifetime she reduced Britain to an island and then lived luxuriously. She lived very luxuriously. She was in a gilded cage, though, to a point. Most of them are. But when they get out of that cage, they still act like spoiled brats. Reading into the article, a tech conference for women and non-binary workers in the field last week. That was their first mistake, is opening that door, pretending to be inclusive, pretending like they care. And then when they get overrun, suddenly it's a problem. Anyways, last week was overrun by men, where an organizer said some unwelcome guests falsely claimed to be non-binary to make it in, and some onlookers watched the ensuing outcry unfold with amusement and a lack of sympathy, because it's a big damn joke. That's why they're laughing at you. Who are you to say that they're not non-binary? Who are you to say that they were falsely claiming to be women, when that's all it takes anymore is to make the claim? Men showed up and you didn't want men there, but you made that invitation open by saying non-binary workers could come. You cracked that door and they kicked it open. Quote, you have to admit it's pretty funny watching a dude yelling about dudes being dudes, said outnumbered guest Ben Ferguson on Wednesday. Indeed, Cullen White, chief impact officer of the group that organized the seminar, Anta B, chastised attendees for having lied about their gender. What did you think was going to happen? Yeah, a lot of guys are doing this to take advantage, to get over, or to expose how stupid all of that is. Quote, yesterday it became clear that there are a far greater number of cisgender men than we anticipated. Simply put, some of you lied about your gender when you registered, White said at the conference. Oh, boo-hoo. Outnumbered co-host Emily Compagno said she didn't feel any sympathy for anyone at the conference who complained about men gaming the system. What did you expect? She asked. Of course you're going to have the whole camel eventually get into the tent, because you have been totally fine with it. Its nose. Oh, I see. You've been totally fine with its nose going in there. And like I had said, they cracked that door and all of these dudes showed up and kicked it down. What did you think was going to happen? That is hilarious. Couple more comments here from those joining us on YouTube. All People says AOC, i.e. the airhead of Congress, is the child of a rich architect based in New York City whose death also provided her with life insurance policy worth millions. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And it says Soros funded her campaigns. Keisha says, I've heard of these trans people going and buying tampons. Now, what are they going to do with that? But those companies are encouraging that, because if you buy it and can't use it, you still purchased it. So why wouldn't they pander to that? Unbelievable. Helter says, don't hate the player, hate the game. Exactly. Stupid rules made up by dumb people will be abused. Gary says, symbolism over substance. And Urban says, a new Hockey Canada, a new hockey or hokey minor league. Okay, a new Hockey Canada minor league policies raising eyebrows regarding how change rooms are to be used. Nature Nerd says 20% of Gen Z is gay, which means population collapse in the next few decades. They claim to be, but are they? That's the question, because young people will do that. Young people will do that. They'll claim something and then it isn't true. And I go back to when I worked for juvenile justice, and we used to do the interviews with the clients, and on the questionnaire was religion. And 80% of them would say either Rastafarian or Wiccan, and didn't know a damn thing about either religion. They just thought it sounded cool. And unless they were from South America, if they were of like Mexican or descent or something like that, they always said Catholic. Johnny Future says, am I late? Sorry, we'll catch the replay. No problem, Johnny. And Dragon says, play non-binary games, win non-binary prizes. There you go. And Orbit says, players under 18 years old will not be allowed to change in the changing rooms, as the coaches cannot know what gender someone identifies as. That's interesting. And Eric Peter says, it's this whole culture of being something you're not, dressing up in a costume like a cosplayer. Exactly. At least the cosplayer takes that shit off when they go home. They do it at a show just for fun or for attention or whatever, but it ends at some point. These are people who want to pretend 24/7 and insist that you go along with it. Cosplayer isn't going to fight with you that they're not Cobra Commander. You know, whatever, dude, I'm just wearing a costume. These people will fight you tooth and nail about it and will be as awful as possible in the process. But as far as Gen Z 20% being gay, I don't believe it. I think that they claim that they are because they think that's the thing to do. But that in of itself is destructive. That in of itself is destructive and will lead them down paths that will cause them harm over time. A considerable amount of emotional harm, if not physical harm, for a variety of reasons, because of the conformity of their bodies. You know, so you think, so you will be. If you believe in something hard enough, or force yourself to believe in something hard enough, your body will start to conform to it, or you may do things to force that conformity that in many cases may be irreversible, or at least very difficult to change. It's a shame. Johnny says, on April 15th, can I identify as someone who already paid their taxes? Yeah, no kidding. And Bams says, all the hormone disruptors may well make 20% gay. No kidding. Because you take those pills or take those shots, and they could do damage over time that may be irreversible again. And I will throw it out there while we're on the subject before we wrap up here, that something I had been meaning to talk about. I done a video on it some time ago, a year ago actually, that currently the majority of men taking ED medication, that's erectile dysfunction medication like Viagra, I think is the most famous, are in their early 20s now. When that stuff rolled out, that was for really old dudes. You know, you were like 70, 80s, you're 80 years old wanting Viagra. Why are guys in their early 20s needing this? That should not be happening. emotional confusion, lack of exercise, poor diet, medications, poor life choices, take your pick. Why is the number one person, age group, category of men that needs this now like 24? That's scary. Johnny says, I'll try it. I'll let you know how that goes. No, yeah, you'll end up in jail. That's what'll happen. But anyway, I will remind you all that if you're looking for me on Twitter, it is at Coffee Talk Chat. So at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube. And you can also find me on fistfulofradio.com, which is a podcasting service out of Atlanta, where I am broadcast Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. And if you wanted to get in on the conversation where I might be able to read one of your comments, you have to come to Coffee Talk on YouTube. And you can find a lot of that information in the description box down below. Eric Peter says in the 70s and especially the 80s, we had teen idols who were very proactive or who were just outright gay. And I don't think girls wanted to wear cone bras like Madonna. Interesting. Well, I think a lot of the teen idols at that time, though, also were very masculine males. Look at some of like the 80s action stars, very masculine. We still had a lot of that. But I understand what you're talking about. I do understand what you're talking about. But anyway, with that, I will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you to everyone who joined us here today. Very much appreciated. Thank you also to Keisha for making a donation to the channel. Always appreciated. Helps a lot, especially with our sheltering and taking care of stray animals. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up, and we will catch you all tomorrow. I hope you all got something out of the conversation.